All right, well, welcome to the fifth Arctic Resilience Forum. Before we get started, I just wanted to give everybody sort of a quick reminder about some administrative things. First of all, we welcome your questions in the Q&A, so you'll have a Q&A box at the bottom there, so please feel free to put in your questions for the panelists that we're going to have today. Next is just to look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see an option for interpretation, and that interpretation, you either pick Russian or English, and we encourage you to pick the language of your choice, and then you'll have that opportunity to hear in either Russian or English. And lastly is to please check out our Slack. You would have received a link to it when you registered, and so we encourage you to keep the conversation going there. So, to date, we've had excellent discussions about Indigenous youth leadership, food security, renewable energy, and human health in pandemics. What is evident from all these early sessions is the intimate connection between the different topics that we've covered and the common threads that exist across these issues when we use resilience as a frame. The concept of resilience has given us a lens to examine the strengths of Arctic communities and also consider vulnerabilities. But perhaps most compelling is we can see that the efforts to build the resilience of communities in one issue area has the direct consequences for other areas. We have the opportunity to examine things in a more holistic manner and expose these interconnections. Broadband connectivity, the focus of this session, has been raised in several of our previous sessions as a critical need to strengthen the resilience of Arctic communities. I would go so far as to say that reliable, accessible connectivity is seen as a cornerstone, something that is a foundation needed to respond to other vulnerabilities. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Tina Pidgeon, Wilson Center Global Fellow for the Polar Initiative and the Principal for Tina Pidgeon Strategies, who will guide us through today's discussion. Tina.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. I join Jennifer in welcoming you all to the Arctic Resilience Forum, where today we'll be discussing, as she said, broadband connectivity, a hot topic everywhere, but especially for the Arctic. Around the world, broadband permeates our everyday lives. We find directions anywhere we want to go. We can visit faraway places and purchase goods almost without a second thought. And now, in the midst of this global pandemic, broadband is sustaining our most basic and significant needs, enabling distance education to keep our children engaged in learning while also protecting them and our teachers, allowing many to continue working from home while keeping our family and broader economies afloat, supporting public health both by maintaining social distancing and supporting efforts of researchers and healthcare providers as we guide our way through this global pandemic. And of course, keeping us connected both in our personal lives and enabling discussions like this one. So in Arctic communities, broadband serves these same purposes every day, advancing education through distance learning, promoting healthy communities with telemedicine, creating economic opportunity and providing virtual connections among families and beyond. But that can only happen where it exists. The challenges to serve remote Arctic communities are well known. Unforgiving terrain and climate, vast distances, and low population have all been identified as longstanding barriers to universal broadband connectivity throughout the Arctic. 2 Arctic Council task forces have studied the significance and challenges of delivering broadband connectivity throughout the Arctic. The Task Force on Improved Connectivity in the Arctic issued its report in May 2019. I encourage you all to check that out if you haven't yet. And it built on the work of the Task Force on Telecommunications Infrastructure in the Arctic, issued in May 2017. The Arctic Economic Council has also studied and reported on this topic, and the Connectivity Working Group, which we have some members today on our panel, is continuing this effort to identify the challenges and explore ways to overcome them. Our panels today contribute further to these efforts by discussing the what, how, and why of connectivity in the Arctic. What are the technologies that will continue to drive broadband connectivity further throughout Arctic communities? How can investment capital for infrastructure be unlocked? And why is broadband connectivity critical to Arctic communities' resilience? So we're going to kick off our panels here now that we've set the stage. For each panel, I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then we'll start with an opening question and continue from there with further question and discussions. I encourage all of you who are online joining us today who have questions, please post them in the chat. We'll pick up your questions as we go. And I'll also note that some specific questions may be directed to panelists along the way, so keep your eye on responses that may be coming through in the Q&A as well. So now we're going to turn to our first panel to explore the technologies and ongoing projects that are advancing broadband connectivity in the Arctic today. So joining me now on the screen are Curtis Shaw, Tim Stelzig, and Alexander Vlasov. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm just going to give some quick introductions and then we will get down to questions. Curtis Shaw is the president of Northwest Tel, a telecommunications carrier serving the Canadian Arctic. In his current position, Curtis is responsible for business strategy and day-to-day operations of Northwest Tel, which reaches 120,000 Northern Canadians in 96 communities throughout the Yukon and Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Northern British Columbia, and Alberta. Curtis joined the Arctic Economic Council in 2018 as a legacy member for Canada and sits on the AEC's Connectivity Working Group. Northwest Tel is implementing its 3-year Every Community project, bringing 50 megabit per second and higher speeds to over 10,000 Canadian Arctic households in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that.
Thanks, Tina.
Stelzig. Thanks, Curtis. I'll introduce you all and then circle back around. Tim works on Arctic policy and other federal regulatory matters for GCI in Alaska, the largest provider of Arctic telecommunications in the United States. Tim also has many years of experience as a manager at the Federal Communications Commission, and he will be able to tell us more about the project GCI has embarked on, delivering fiber along the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Also, Alex Vlasov, the Director of Intercarrier Relations with Megaphone, a leading wireless and telecom communications company in Russia. Alex has 17 years experience in the telecom field with data, voice, and mobile services, including prior positions with Deutsche Telekom as head of the ICSS Moscow Regional Office and Sovintel, which is now VEON. Megaphone is undertaking with Cinia the first trans-Arctic undersea fiber cable project. Once completed, that project would connect coastal areas of Finland, Norway, the Russian Arctic, and on to Japan. So welcome all of you. And as I said, we'll kick off with our first question. As I've described, you each have existing broadband investments as well as new projects in development or on the horizon. If you tell us a little bit about your project, and in particular, would you highlight the most significant technological innovation that will deliver new opportunities for resilience in the Arctic? Curtis, let's kick off with you, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina. As Tina mentioned, Northwest Tel serves about 120,000 residents over a geography of about 4 million square kilometers. So if you look at the technology we employ, it's been a combination of satellite, microwave, fiber over the last 20 or 30 years. The focus over the last number of years has been fiber optic development and moving more fiber into the Arctic, above the Arctic Circle. We now own and operate about 5,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable. And that has been one of the big shifts in the landscape over the last decade. Big focus around fiber is around future-proofing the northern networks, not only delivering what customers need today, but able to grow the services and the broadband capacity over the next number of 5, 10, 15 years. We do have a number of communities, Tina, where fiber isn't viable. These are communities that are served predominantly by satellite. And those satellite communities, over time, we've been increasing the capacity on those satellite networks. And what we've tried to do is work on what's called a community aggregator model. So unlike some of the direct-to-home technology you've heard about, putting large dishes in a community and then fanning it out from a technology standpoint with either wireless or fiber-to-the-home technology to deliver higher speeds for northern residents. The last thing I'd maybe mention is the investment in technology to improve sustainability. You think about these networks right now, the telecom networks are the primary investment, but there's been a lot of focus around resiliency in the north, and this can include power backup, network redundancy, fiber rings. You can imagine that if you have a fiber cut and it's 1,000 kilometers away, whether it's helicopters or driving down to repair it, those are considerations in northern Canada that we really need to look at what we can do to improve sustainability and reliability of networks. So what that may mean is over-engineering the network with duplicate or triplicate power redundancy and making sure there's redundant paths if something actually breaks or is impacted by extreme weather or climate. So I think in summary, lots of fiber development, fiber in the wide area network, running more fiber networks directly to homes. And then in the satellite space, looking at low Earth orbit constellations and what we can do to put a large series of terminals in a community and then leverage next generation LTE or fiber to the home to the end customer.
Thanks, Curtis. That mix of technologies is something that I would like to come back to as we get further into the discussion. And for now, Tim, I'll turn the question to you if you could add in terms of project development. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. And it's, listening to Curtis, I think GCI's story would be very similar. We also use that whole range of technologies, whether it's submarine cable, fixed microwave, fiber to the home. We have a lot of mobile wireless technology. I think what I want to do is focus on, just to sort of bring this home as a single community for a minute. So I want to talk about Dutch Harbor, Alaska, which is a community of 4,000 people. It is really remote. It is 800 miles from Anchorage, which is the nearest large community. You can only get there by airplane or by boat. And it's in the Aleutian chain, which today relies exclusively on satellite technology, which means there is no wireline, landline, terrestrial broadband service. And so, satellite's really important. It's a critical part of the puzzle in Alaska and the other parts of the rural Arctic, but it doesn't give the same kind of user experience, broadband experience that most of us on this call just take for granted. So we have been working for years to find a way to bring broadband to Dutch Harbor. It is the largest fishing port in the United States by volume. And so it's a really critical part of Alaska's economy. And the challenge has just been, with that 800-mile distance to get there, it's like, how do you find a sustainable business case that makes that possible? And with a little help, well, a lot of help, but a portion of our, just a portion of the cost for our network. We got a grant recently from the USDA's Rural Development Program, and we can talk more about funding models later. But that has really helped us close the business case. And so starting this spring, we're going to be breaking ground on a new submarine fiber network that will bring fiber all the way from Kodiak, all the way down the Aleutian chain to Dutch Harbor. We're going to be connecting 5 other communities on the way as we go. In Dutch Harbor, we'll be building a fiber to the premise network that will bring gigabit speed service to people in that really, really remote community. And then also fast fixed wireless service, going again to that, the multiple models of being able to deploy broadband to the other 5 communities along the way, as I said. Service is going to be, really affordable. And in terms of innovation, well, there are there's just a ton of innovative things that are happening in the telecom space. The innovation that really is most exciting to me is sort of the innovation that we enable as an industry in other industries and, human endeavors elsewhere. Like other infrastructure, broadband, it is an enabling technology, and it kind of has this multiplier effect across, across the economy and across human, just social welfare. And so, whether it's like big data analytics or artificial intelligence or remote sensing or, whatever it is that the industries in Dutch Harbor need, to be able to do to sort of revolutionize their own businesses. You know, that's what, you know, this kind of technology brings. That's what I'm excited about.
That's great context, Tim. Thanks.
Yep.
Alex, would you pick up with your fiber project? Tell us something about that, and if you could highlight any of the technology innovations that are helping to make that possible.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. So basically, I would like to underline that I do see in this, just the third speaker here, I can clearly see that the connectivity is extremely important for the Arctic region. And it is very important, as many people mentioned already, for educational, for social needs. But I can also add that Russia is one of the most advanced countries from a digital government perspective. And basically in Russia, you can get access to quite a lot of governmental things, like you can get your passport remotely, vote remotely, and connectivity is becoming crucial, not for education or social communication, but for governmental needs of population. And the Russian part of Arctic is really big, and we have, I don't know, definitely dozens, even hundreds, thousands of people living in that area, and those people are now disconnected from all the digital ecosystem, and therefore connecting them by fiber is extremely important. Let's say our project, the most unique thing about our project, I believe, is that the unique combination of different technologies, of different companies, of different interests. So this is not a rocket science to build a submarine cable. This is unique. This is the cutting edge of technologies. We've got the best, you know, vendors are supporting us, and or many other submarine cables. But none of them, except for one Quintillion project, have built a submarine cable in Arctic. So Russians are quite familiar with Arctic. We live quite a lot of people live there. There is a big scientific and research program been held in that area. But again, none of them been previously focused on submarine cable. Russians could do gas and oil pipes in Arctic, but they've never been doing submarine cables in Arctic. That's one thing. Second thing is that submarine cables is quite an expensive thing, and just the demand and I would say the amount of money, the funds people could spend on that connectivity is not enough to justify those investments. And the uniqueness of this project is that this project provides a completely new route from Europe to Asia, and these big companies like OTTs, big telco carriers, they need to carry this traffic, and they justify the major part of the investments. While the local communities and local budget, they need to justify just the like couple hundred kilometers branching units towards the shore. And this is another dimension of uniqueness of this project. So that's a truly international project, combines different interests of different nations, and connects really different. I think this could be a bridge between different countries. We also plan, as probably a second phase, to extend this cable to Alaska and the west coast of the United States. So again, this will be the shortest route. This is very important from business perspective, but it also enables to build a very good connectivity from the demand of that local population. This will be unlimited connectivity from a capacity perspective. So I think this combination of probably hardly combined things is the uniqueness of our project.
Thanks, Alex. And as I hear each of you describe the undertakings of your companies and the projects you're working on, it's interesting that I'm picking up kind of three themes or different approaches. I mean, what Curtis is describing, in order to expand upon your existing projects, you really, I think that the term you used was the community aggregation model. And Tim, what we see with GCI is you have a kind of a regional project. And then Alex, the project you're describing is one that is taking really an international or large company demand and being able to build on that to serve local communities. I'd like to explore more fully each of these models. And Curtis, if I could start with you, would you talk a little bit more about this, the community aggregator model? And you mentioned a strong focus on fiber, and how are you building out with fiber using that model? And then how are you supplementing with other technologies? Because as you mentioned, you can't always get fiber to each community that you'd like to serve.
Yeah, so I can give you an example in Nunavut. It's the eastern part of Canada, where we came from a place, if you go back 3 or 4 years ago, we were using C-band satellite. The whole territory had about 400 megabits per second for the territory, and that would be including government, residents, schools. The high school system had roughly 14 or 15 megabits per second for 4,000 kids. So that was a situation where C-band was constrained. Working with one of our satellite partners, we were able to purchase capacity on a high throughput satellite, install new dishes in every community, upgrade the local access plant, fiber and DSL technology. And we were able to take the whole territory from a shared 400 megabits per second on satellite up closer to 10,000 megabits per second. So you have a situation now, you have schools that have the bandwidth that they can use Facebook and YouTube, and they can actually submit assignments online and do research. Whereas, 3 or 4 years ago, it was very much email centric. So, a school that would have, 1 or 2 megabit per second connection on this new satellite community aggregation model, a high school now could have a 500 meg connection to the internet, and during the daytime burst all the way up to 500 megabits per second. So a network like that is investing in big, robust, resilient technologies in the community, and then fanning it out with local access, whether it was DSL technology or fiber directly to a school, and then providing faster service to residents. And in the technology we invested in, like I said, it's got extra power. It's more reliable. There's heaters on it for melting snow. There's vibration shields. If there's a snowstorm, you can actually shake the snow off in the winter. So a model like that compared to, say, a direct-to-home model, where a customer has to put a dish on the side of a house or on top of the house, we found that a more reliable, resilient model from a technology development standpoint. And with LEO technology evolving, that's what we've really kind of are looking to do as well. Put large LEO dishes in a community that are backed up, that really residents would be able to see the benefit from fiber into their home, and then a LEO cluster of dishes operating at our office.
If I may add, I believe that our project, so I would call it, we have a kind of a modular structure. So we have the big trunk actually connecting Norway to Japan, and then with backhauls to mainly traffic exchange points like Stockholm, London, or Frankfurt. So, and the big guys will pay for this big trunk. Then we have big enterprises in Russia, like all this oil and gas sector. They will buy and will pay for the most capacity connecting the seashore. And then, like Curtis just mentioned, this community aggregation, aggregated communities could get connected to a cable leading station, and actually could combine. You can combine those two approaches. So at the moment, well, it will take 3 to 4 years for our cable to be completed, but you can aggregate the traffic in a certain point and connect them by a big satellite dish. And once the cable is there, you can just switch from satellite connection to a submarine cable. So I think this approach could be really, flexible in getting people connected as soon as possible.
I see some questions coming in from the audience that I want to make sure, because our time will pass quickly, so I want to make sure to get these asked as well. And I will try in each case to identify the person asking the question. So apologies if I get name pronunciations not right on the money. The first question is from Aranga Golapthi, who asks, I know internet is extremely costly, for example, in Nunavut communities. What factors limit offering affordable internet service, or I guess stated differently, I think each of you in your presentations identified affordable service as part of what your company projects are focused on. Can you give us a sense of how you're able to deliver affordable services given the challenges and overcome what would otherwise be affordability barriers?
So
I'm
Tim,
happy to go first on this, and unless I couldn't hear the end of Tina's comments, so Curtis, if she called you out, please go.
Actually, I was pointing to you, Tim.
Oh, okay, well, perfect. Yeah, no, I would say that, so in terms of bringing, making service affordable, as I mentioned a minute ago, the cost of deploying broadband networks in the Arctic are, they're enormous if you're going to a really remote area. And just the challenge of getting connectivity from the urban part of, your region to the most remote part, that's really where the biggest cost is. And then the challenge in the Arctic is that once you get to the community you're trying to reach, those communities are small. And so there's not really that many customers to split your service between. And so the economic challenge in making service affordable is finding, it's either finding a lot of customers through demand aggregation, like Curtis mentioned, or it's finding large customers that have really intense data needs that have, sort of enough sort of enterprise money at stake that they can pay at prices that, higher than residential prices that help bring down the cost of service for residential users. Or it's finding, government support programs to help with some of the ongoing OpEx type costs that providers have to run their networks. And so, for a provider like GCI, the way we make service affordable in rural Alaska is like by piecing together, money from a lot of different sources to help spread those costs among, to make costs as affordable as they can for any individual user. Now, there's only so much you can do. So the reality is in rural Alaska, in many places in rural Alaska, expenses will be, costs are still high, but we're driving them down as far as we can. And again, like I said at the outset with this Solution Fiber project, the prices that customers will see at the end of the day are going to be very affordable. And I think everyone's going to be excited. So.
Let me get one more question into this panel. I'm glad you guys are coming back towards the end because we're getting lots of questions come in. 5G is raised. Any comments on the impact of 5G, either on growing demand that makes it more possible to deliver services, or does 5G add additional demand on your services without adding additional revenue, which presents challenges for resiliency in the future to be able to provide the bandwidth needed to support the services that are being demanded? I'll open that up to whoever wants to take it.
Alex, you wanna?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not. I know that 5G licenses are already granted in the United States. I'm not sure about Canada, and some carriers have even deployed the networks. So I believe that, well, as Megaphone is a mobile carrier, I can clearly see that our tech guys, they're always deploying the network globally in the country. That's the way they do it. And so answering this question, I see the development of the backbone of the transport infrastructure will go in parallel to 5G. So they're complementary. So yes, 5G requires low latency, and there's not a big sense having 5G base stations with very poor connectivity. But still, with high latencies, but still, even if you deploy 5G network in an isolated area, but you can still get some local services in the higher speeds. So I believe they will go in parallel and will complement each other. In Russia, it's even more funny situation. So the frequencies, the spectrum that was granted for 5G is not good enough, and we expect 5G to be deployed in like 3-4 years only. So by that time the broadband connectivity will be there and will be perfectly fit each other from timing perspective. So they go in parallel. They're not dependent. They're not critically dependent on each other.
Yeah, and I would just, one quick comment. I would echo what Alex just said, in that they do develop in parallel. And where we have fast broadband networks in Alaska, GCI has been rolling out 5G services. But again, it depends on having that fast the middle mile connectivity to the region before that technology makes a ton of sense.
So I want to thank you all for these really great insights. There are a lot of questions we haven't gotten to, so hopefully we'll be able to get to them when we all come back together at the end. So thank you. I'll invite you to turn off your cameras at this point, and we'll welcome our second panel to the screen. And while you're coming on second panel, I will go ahead and make those introductions so we can get as much content in as possible. This is for a discussion of how we can expand broadband investment throughout the Arctic. So we're welcoming Dr. Pam Lloyd, Curtis Shaw, you're staying with us, and Dr. Laura Way to the discussion. Introducing Pam, she's the leader of GCI's Government Healthcare and Education Business Unit, collaborating with leaders throughout Arctic Alaska to prioritize success strategies for using connectivity to close gaps in access to healthcare and education. Her experience as a teacher and technology coordinator has given her hands-on understanding of the technology needs of students and educators. Pam has a PhD in transformational leadership in the digital age, and she is currently chairing the Arctic Economic Council's Connectivity Working Group. Dr. Laura Way joins us. She served as Canada's head of delegation on the Arctic Council's task force on improved connectivity in the Arctic and continues to work with the Arctic Council's U.S. connectivity coordinator. Dr. Way is the manager of strategic policy for the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency, which is the regional development agency for Canada's territories, and her academic work has focused on Northern and Indigenous economic development. Welcome you both to the second panel. And we will kick it off with this question and then continue with discussion. So I think it's been acknowledged broadly and certainly is highlighted in each of the connectivity task force reports. We've been wrestling for quite a while with this issue of how to get broadband infrastructure deployed in some of the most challenging places to serve, both geographically and economically. So what do you all, in your experience, what's the combination of factors needed to connect the remaining unconnected communities? And Laura, let's kick off with you.
Thank you, Tina. I think there's actually two angles to this question. The first angle is how we can connect communities that are currently not receiving broadband. And that was the focus of our first panel. So we heard how Nunavut communities are reliant on satellite and do not have access to high-speed internet. There's a second angle to this question is how do we connect unconnected communities within communities that already have access to fiber? And that's more of an affordability issue, or sometimes it is a data cap issue, because often in the north currently there's not a lot of unlimited data plans, though they're coming. So there's two types of angles to that question, and it depends on what type of communities that we are talking about. In terms of the first set, connecting communities that are not even connected to high-speed internet, if we look at the work of the Arctic Council's task force on connectivity, we found a couple of good findings and recommendations. The first is, and I'm sure my panelists will agree, that both public and private sector funding needs to be there, because often there's not a strong business case to connect these really remote communities. The second thing about this, as we also heard on our first panel, is that technology is moving. And so governments, and this was a recommendation from the task force, is we need to be open to emerging technologies. And when we design new funding programs, we need to be technology neutral. And those are the things that the Canadian government has done and other Arctic states have done, is they've set targets that they want our telecommunication companies to provide. And if for accessing public funding, it's more about reaching those targets than a particular technology. And so we really want to make sure that we're designing funding programs that are technologically neutral. The last thing we need to ensure is that we have a regulatory framework that understands that working in Arctic conditions is different. And again, that was a recommendation that often there's very short construction seasons. And so as governments, we need to understand the operating environment in the Arctic. Those are some of the things that will build connectivity faster in the Arctic.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm glad you brought those recommendations in. Pam, I'm wondering if you could pick up with that and talk a little bit about the work of the Arctic Economic Council and the working group, the connectivity working group. To what extent do you see these recommendations coming up in your work with the AEC and whether they're being adopted and pressed into the future as we build connectivity opportunities for the Arctic?
Definitely. I think we're taking those very next steps, Laura, and I think this is great. We didn't even rehearse this, and I just appreciate the work between the Arctic Council and the Arctic Economic Council, and very happy that Mark Murray's position with the U.S. State Department is going to be that liaison. He's actually on our advisory. Part of the work that we're doing is that next step, taking the work the TIFCA report created and looking at those different models of investment and creating a sustainable decision investment matrix tool that says, what are those different ways that we invest and how is it that we invest and what are the considerations and benefits? And then taking the toolbox of technologies so that we can be neutral in that, because in some sense, there's going to be fiber that we're going to use as we're looking at the Aleutian Chain project as one of those. We may be looking at LEOS as another option. And I think for the Arctic, we really want to be able to showcase for our stakeholders and the the people that are looking at our report and making those decisions in those public investments that we do need in order to make this happen, and those decision makers at the government level, that we need to be able to create that middle mile. It's generally in what we call the lower 48 or in the areas where you have a lot more people. It's a different kind of investment structure that you need. They're working to get to the last mile. We need to get to the middle mile, right? We're trying to figure out how to get to that last mile. We're trying to get to the islands where the people are. And for that, we do need to have that public-private partnership. And so we want to be able to put together this decision matrix as to how do telecommunication companies create the investment pieces and what do we put into that? How are we making our decisions? And then we layer in what are the technologies of how we get there. So I think we're going to see great synergies in the work and the work that the Arctic Council has done with the TIFCA report, as well as the former working groups within the Arctic Economic Council. We don't want to reinvent what has already been done. We really do want to build on that. And Curtis, I don't know if you want to add to that. Curtis is my right-hand person on our working group. I know that Dr. Pips Veazey is on this call, and she has joined us from the University of Alaska because we want to ensure that we're also looking at this from a research base. I'm not sure if Christine O'Connor is on the call, but she's on our advisory as well, so that we're also getting representation from the Alaska Telecom Association, so that we're looking at what's happening across Alaska in that respect. But Curtis, did you want to add anything on what the Arctic Economic Council report is going to do for the working group?
No, I think Pam, that's right on. You know, we're going to talk about some of the things you talked about with private-public partnerships and the different models. Both you and Laura commented on them. You know, one of the things I would maybe just add in terms of sustainability and affordability, because I know that is a theme. When I talk to some of our federal counterparts and regulators and politicians, a lot of times I'm talking about cost of electricity, cost of aircraft and transportation in the Arctic. Availability of housing, that's a major issue for workers, and even cost of living for workers. Just back to electricity, we do have some communities in the Arctic where the revenue that we receive for residential broadband is lower than the cost of electricity that we need to power the network. So when you look at infrastructure developments, many times in the Arctic, it's beyond just direct investment in broadband. It's how to make this network sustainable from a cost input standpoint. So many times in my presentations, I'm talking about electricity, transportation, getting 2 technicians on an aircraft at a cost of $20,000 or $30,000 to do some basic service. So those cost of living components and cost input components are really important in terms of the sustainability model. The other thing that hasn't been talked about yet, I think comes back to one of the earlier questions around Nunavut and affordability, is what we've been trying to do in many of these networks is have an anchor tenant. So in the Nunavut model, the government uses the network during the day. So these are the healthcare centers, schools, government operations. And at night, that bandwidth's repurposed for Netflix and residential entertainment and residential internet access. And so those are some really great ways to try to get at those ongoing operational costs by repurposing the daytime government bandwidth or an anchor tenant bandwidth into the evening hours to benefit the residential customer base. So those are some of the things that you can address in terms of that sustainability of these ongoing business models for broadband development.
You all have put so many great ideas on the table. I need to follow up on a couple of them. First, Pam, you mentioned the sustainable decision matrix tool that the AEC is developing, and that brings in a question to the last panel that actually Pip Svezy raised that I'd like to put to this panel that fits in. How do you approach decision making in terms of where to make short versus long-term investments in this time of rapid change? So Curtis or Pam, I'd love for one of you to pick up on that question, and even if you can, tie it to this decision matrix tool that you're talking about in the AEC working group.
Well, I can go first. I think when we're looking at short term, it's really around where do we have our infrastructure, and then how can we get to that next step, right? That's been, in a lot like where Curtis is, we are really focused on our anchor tenants. It's our health corporations, it's our education. That's what gets us to our build outs. That's how we, and that's really part of a public-private partnership for the US. It's through our E-rate and our rural healthcare funding they're making the decisions through a competitive bid process to select. And that's what gets our short-term build out into that. Long-term, we're looking at, again, you look at the Aleutians project that Tim was talking about. That's a long-term project that we've been talking about for some time, and putting planning together on how do we get there? Where do we have our landing? How are we going to do that? And those are when we're applying for large grants. So those are the ways that we're looking at, but it's really tied to a public-private partnership.
Maybe I just add a couple things, Tina, to Pip's question. The first one, in terms of rapid change, one of the learnings we've had is if we put bandwidth in a community, the community will learn to soak it up or very quickly add bandwidth. I haven't seen many cases where we've over-engineered a community and we can just walk away and not have to look at an upgrade down the road. So fiber investments, I think, are good long-term investments and will help future-proof the network. The other thing that I don't think has been raised yet that I would bring up is we're doing more and more at the community level. Indigenous community engagement, what are the benefits for a community in construction of a project, getting local governments involved in the decision making. We ran a fiber on a private partnership a year ago with an Alaskan company that connected Alaska to the lower 48. But through that construction, there was a lot of community engagement, and the 3 First Nations along the route, probably about half of the workers that worked on that project were local workers. We ran in the project out of a First Nations Development Corporation, one of their camps. So I think it's also important here to get down to the ground level and really get community support for what type of infrastructure we're putting in, how does it impact the community, what are the upfront construction benefits, and then what are the ongoing benefits when the project is complete for the school, the health center, for the government office locally, kind of at that community level.
I'd just like to add one more thing, Tina, that we had to act very quickly during COVID, and it goes to part of what Laura was talking about with caps. We do have caps on data, and so when our students had to quickly have school from home, we worked with our education school districts to create a local access product that allowed for students to be able to use their cable modem, their wireless DSL products, and not have caps to use local and use the traffic locally. And we did that within literally 30 days to be able to turn that around by the end of the school year, so that they could start out their school year this year. So that's another example of us working with our local areas in order to ensure that they had adequate bandwidth to be able to do school.
Well, and I mean, that really strikes me as another form of public-private partnership, which is another area that I wanted to explore in more detail. I mean, specifically, Laura, I think Canada had a big launch this week of your universal broadband programs, and I'm hoping you can. There's a lot there, but I'm hoping you can give us a synthesis of what's happening, because it sounds like it's going to make some pretty transformative change.
Yes, so the government launched the Universal Broadband Fund. For those following Canadian connectivity, this was announced last year, budget 2019, but it was just released this week with an additional top-up of $750 million. The department that is running that program is our Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. All the details are on their website, and they will have they're going to have Pathfinder services for smaller groups to be connected and to apply, and it's a lot more service provided this time. And again, the details are on the website. But one of the things that I wanted to stress again is that that program is a results-oriented program, which is designed to bring connectivity to those areas that currently within Canada that do not have our national target of 50-10, as well as to increase mobile coverage along routes that are primarily serve Indigenous communities. And so this is a real key gaps. And it's looking for partners. And so the application process is now open. But that's just one of many different programs that the Government of Canada offers. Infrastructure Canada, through their Rural and Northern Fund, have funded major connectivity projects. And even the agency that I work for, which is CanNor, we can come in at a very early level and fund feasibility studies. So a lot of these major programs, you actually need to have a fairly good, strong business plan all sort of map out before you're going to get the major dollars that are available through these other departments. Whereas CanNor could come in, and we've done this with the proposed Kavalik Manitoba hydro fiber link with 1.6 million to fund feasibility studies, because often that's a gap in the funding programs, is how do you build the case in order to get the large significant broadband funding. So I encourage people who are interested in the Universal Broadband Fund to check out the website. They're also running a series of webinars on different aspects over the next, I think starting next week is the first one. So there's a lot of details there. So it's not a program that my department runs, so I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but again, it's going to be groundbreaking for the North, this level of investment, and will also help. Canada also has challenges in our rural areas and across the country in every province, and this new program should go a long ways in helping to close those gaps.
That's great. So I want to ask you all one closing question before we switch out on panels. We've also talked about anchor tenants And I wanted to pick up on a question from our audience, which is how do, I can get back to it, from Alan Pope. How do Arctic research and observing needs feed into the development of broadband connectivity in the Arctic? Are we seeing that the demand for scientific information and data helping to feed or act as an anchor tenant as you look at deploying or making the case to deploy additional infrastructure?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in there, Tina. One of the things is Canada has the High Arctic Research Station. It's a new institution just built in Cambridge Bay. From what I understand from the people who run it, and that's Polar Knowledge Canada, that they're a huge data user and can probably serve as an anchor tenant for that region. And I'm sure Curtis could probably speak more specifically around charges, internet needs. But research conducted in the north needs good connectivity. Currently, you hear stories of people shipping out data still on disks because they don't have enough bandwidth to upload it on the network. And so institution like CHARS or the expanding in the Canadian Arctic, we are expanding our post-secondary universities with the new Yukon University. Those are all going to be strong anchor clients. And then the other thing around the research community, and especially with marine and boats, is that when we send out research vessels in the Arctic, again, they are needing strong connectivity. And all those types of users will help build the case for expanded in this case, marine connectivity, expanded uses. So it's a primary driver of new connectivity.
Those are great examples of anchor tenants and then building that on top of the public-private partnerships we talked about, as well as these important factors for deploying more broadband infrastructure. I want to thank you all for your participation on this panel. We'll see you back here shortly. And invite you to turn off your cameras for now, and we'll welcome now our third panel. Gosh, it seems like this session could go like twice as long. Sorry to have to keep it moving. So our third panel is the perfect example of saving the best for last. It's my privilege to welcome Nick Hansen, Maya Lukin, and Mikhail Pogodayev to our screen. I'm going to give brief introductions and then we'll get started. Alaska born and raised Nick Hansen is more commonly known as the Eskimo Ninja. Nick's life was transformed when an 8th grader showed him a YouTube video of American Ninja Warrior. Now Nick uses his platform on social media and beyond to motivate and inspire the next generation to lead positive, healthy lifestyles. Maya Lukin is the superintendent at the National Park Service's Western Arctic National Parklands, which includes over 9.2 million acres of federal public land. She is responsible for protecting and preserving the natural and cultural resources within the parks, as well as community relationship building, subsistence management, and preparing for Arctic climate changes. Maya has also served as the mayor of Kotzebue, Alaska. Mikhail Pogodayev is the Deputy Minister for Arctic Development and Indigenous Peoples Affairs in the government of Sakha Republic. Mikhail has previously served as the Executive Director of the Northern Forum, which is the international organization for governors of northern regions, and as the Senior Advisor for Economic and International Relations at the Permanent Representation of Sakha Republic in St. Petersburg. In addition, he has served since 2009 as the chair of the World Reindeer Herders Association, which unites 24 indigenous reindeer herding peoples across the circumpolar north. He defended his PhD dissertation on the theme Development Strategy for Social Infrastructure in the High North of the Russian Federation. I welcome you all to our panel. And we will start with our kickoff question for this group. So I'll ask each of you to please share how the presence or absence of broadband connectivity has shaped either your resilience on a personal level or that of your community. And Nick, if you will, please, I'd love to kick off with you.
Yeah, so we talk about resilience. We've talked about the hows and the what we're trying to do, and I think the most important part is the who we're doing it for, and that's us. And I represent that 100%. I was born in Unalakleet. It's a village of 750 people. We live on the west coast of Alaska. I'm Inupiat Eskimo, and or Inuit or Inuk. Growing up out in rural Alaska, I grew up throughout the entirety of how it's all developed. So I've kind of had a lot of different perspectives on how it goes, but the most important part of it is how I grew up, and up here in rural Alaska, we suffer through a lot of different things, with the struggles of alcoholism, we have the highest suicide rates in the country, in America, per capita out here in rural Alaska. And I think a lot of that is based on like the lack of tangible opportunities that we have. I'm looking at my panelists that I'm sitting next to, and I'm just like in awe, because the reindeer herding leaders is like awesome, because that's subsistence lifestyle, and that's the way we lived our entire lives. And that subsistence lifestyle has kind of started to go away as Western culture has been introduced to our communities. And that's a big part of what I think we've lost our purpose as Alaska Native men and women up here in rural Alaska. But I'm a direct example of what we're doing differently, because when I was growing up, I expected to be an engineer. I was told what to do. I was like told by my teachers, like, this is where you're going to go. You're really great at math, so you should follow this and in your career path. And then when I went to college, I found out that it was boring. I'm going to be honest to you. Engineering just wasn't for me. It was a lot of like redundancy. It was a lot of the same things over and over again, and I wanted that change. So as college kind of went on, I decided, this isn't for me. And I moved home back to Unalakleet to become a coach and to become a teacher's aide. And I found out that was really what I wanted, was that change every single day. And after suffering through a bunch of loss in my life, directly related to the harshness of living in Alaska, I lost 16 of my basketball teammates and classmates to alcohol-related deaths and suicides. I thought there wasn't really many options for me either. And that was until, as you said in my intro, an 8th grader showed me a video of American Ninja Warrior on YouTube. And he was like, hey, you should try out for this show. And I was like, what? And I've always been athletic my entire life. I'm kind of like a premier athlete that's come out of my community. I actually tried out for the UAA basketball team, and I got to practice with them, but was literally told by the coach, you're too short. I'm 5'10", and our point guard was 6 foot. So I was literally told, you're too short to play basketball. And in villages, basketball is life, especially in Alaska. And so this 8th grader showed me a new option, and he showed me an opportunity that I didn't think I had. And now I'm a 6-time American Ninja Warrior. I'm one of the more notable ninjas on the TV show. I've competed in the last 6 seasons, and I made it to Las Vegas 5 out of those 6 seasons. And I was in the top 12 out of 70,000 people that have applied for the show. So to put myself up in that that level of next to those premier athletes that I compete with, and coming from a village of 750 people where I can literally answer the phone and be like, know who it is just by the tone of their voice, or see someone walk down the street and tell you who that person is just because of the way they waddle differently. That's just it's a mind-blowing thing to be able to say, because every time that I present, I'm wondering, is that me? Am I that person that I'm talking about? It's hard for me to believe, but now, after being able to make those accomplishments and show, I've used that platform, and internet has been huge for me, because I'm using that platform to, especially with COVID and how things have changed. I'm a motivational speaker, and I've started to travel to schools, and schools have reached out to me to come out and speak to their communities on how I've been able to become successful. Now that that's changed to virtual, that's like, my biggest passion is motivating young people. That 8th grader motivated me to do what I'm doing. And, it's my obligation, it's my job, it's in my heart everywhere I go to return the favor and pay it forward, and to say, hey, look, 8th graders, you have an opportunity too. Ninth graders, you have an opportunity too. You don't have to, you know, be this cookie cutter person that that society is telling you to be. You can change that. And I am a direct, you know, example of that change and what that possibility is. And it's all because I can do it through virtual. I learned everything I know about an American Ninja Warrior through YouTube and through social media, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, every possible platform. And now I use that platform to show others how I did it. So it's vital to our communities out here in rural Alaska.
Thank you for sharing that, Nick. And I'm really struck by the fact that how that technology has managed to give you a broad reach while still maintaining the connection with your roots and your village. You can be where you want to be and do what you want to do, but be able to do it using the form of technology and really expand the capabilities you already have, but be able to expand and amplify them. So thank you for sharing that. Maya, I'll turn it over to you. If you could share your perspectives on broadband and you know, both the availability or sometimes the absence. For you, even joining today, you had to have multiple fail safes to be able to utilize technology. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so we actually have 3 internets here at my house, and I did have a problem for about 20 minutes trying to get on this morning. We have GCI, which is a satellite, or I'm sorry, a cable internet for us, and then we have Viasat Exceed internet, which is a satellite internet, and neither of those two are working. And so I'm actually connected to the LTE on my AT&T phone up in Kotzebue. So I live in Kotzebue, Alaska, which is above the Arctic Circle. It's about 500 miles away, 600 miles away from Anchorage via, you know, passenger jet. And we have about 3,500 people or so here in Kotzebue. My internet bill right now is $429 a month. I'm not sure if what the definition of affordable is to people, but it's definitely $429 to me is not affordable. So, and that doesn't include our phone bill. And I like to make sure that people understand that we hear, and I've heard continually from all of the internet providers, like, we're going to provide affordable internet, and $429 is not affordable, definitely. I do want to point out that in Kotzebue, or in our area, 6% of our population has already had COVID or has it right now. 4% of our entire region, which is about 7,500 people, about the size of the state of Indiana, 4% of that entire population has or has already had COVID. And so we have emergency orders from all of our tribes, the city and the Northwest Arctic Borough to hunker down. We also are required by their emergency order, if we are a non-essential service, to work from home, telework. And so I do 190% of my work is teleworking from home. Only essential employees that are providing public safety and life-saving services are supposed to be, you know, working from work. This week alone, and today's Wednesday morning, 2 elders have already passed away from COVID from this region. And so all of the schools are closed. We're losing that information from elders. I do know, you know, the community spread is something like 25% or something like that, or 28% community spread. 33% is travel related. And that's from medical appointments in Anchorage, mostly. And then 39% of COVID is linked to a close contact or a family member. So we're teleworking, and I want to make sure that people understand that what affordable internet means in the Arctic. So for work and for school, I pay for GCI internet. It's $299 a month for 200 gigabytes. I was surprised to hear that there was no overage charges, because we've been charged overages every single month since March. We pay for the highest package for work and school, and only work and only school is on that GCI internet. And that's why we pay for more than one. So we also pay for satellite exceed internet. It's 128 something a month. And we use that for our home Wi-Fi. So like Netflix, TikTok, etc. And then we also pay for unlimited data on our AT&T phones. And partially we pay for unlimited data because my husband has been a long time carrier from AT&T and he has a good discount. So not including our phone bills, it's $429 a month. This morning, before this, or actually while I was waiting, I checked the upload and download speeds for GCI, satellite, and AT&T. So for our microwave GCI, it's 6.75 megabits per second download and 3.88 upload. For our satellite exceed, it's 0.28 download and 0.74 upload. And again, it's blowing 30 miles an hour. So our satellite dish is kind of moving around up there. And then for AT&T and why I'm using it, it's 7.9 megabits per second and then download, and then 8.89 upload. And so our LTE right now is working better than the internet. So for this call, this Zoom call alone, I'm going to use 12.1 gigabytes of data for my plan. It's 2.4 gigabytes per hour on a Zoom or a Teams call, and I'm assuming we're going to be on here for 4 or 5 hours. That's what the schedule said. So I'm using 12 gigabytes just for today. We use well over 200 gigabytes per month for work. I mean, I use well over 200 gigabytes per work per month. And then I don't actually have any kids in school right now. I mean, I do, but one of them's a preschooler and I refuse to have her go to school online. So we're not allowing that for her. And then I have a senior in high school that that goes to Mount Edgecombe High School. And so she was home March, April, and May and did online school, but Mount Edgecombe is in person right now. And I feel fortunate that my high school student is in person because none of the schools up here are in person right now. They're 100% online. However, my sister has 3 kids at home and it's 1 hour per day on Zoom for her elementary kids and then 3 hours per day. And she uses 252 gigabytes a month just for school requirements. And so she has to also pay for 2 internets. So she can do one 200 gigabyte because that's the highest you can get, and then one 100 gigabyte in addition to that. Yeah, so like I said, I was to hear that there were no caps because we actually have paid multiple times for additional internet up here. For work, unfortunately, with the federal government, when you have a telework agreement, the telework agreement is that you will provide your own internet. And so I'm working really hard for my staff to try to figure out what we can do to mitigate the costs for them. If I'm requiring them to be on Zoom calls, I try to schedule them maybe twice a week only with the staff and less than an hour. I also ask them that if there's an option to do a teleconference rather than, a video Zoom call, that they ask for that. And it's really, really difficult. We've had multiple subsistence advisory council meetings and subsistence resource commission meetings via teleconference. And, even just having, a face when somebody's talking is better than, not having that. And you can see their cues. You can, see if somebody has a question, et cetera. And so it is really difficult to ask my staff to do that. However, it's also very difficult to ask my staff to pay $450 a month in internet. So it's kind of we try to figure out the balance. I am working with the Alaska region to try to figure out if there's any way that we can, pay for Wi-Fi router. I don't know. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, you paint a very vivid picture of both the myriad usage of the service and how you depend on it, but also the challenges that you have to navigate for it to work. So, Mikhail, if I could turn it to you, and if you could add your perspective on broadband and what it enables and its adequacies and things you'd like to see changed.
Thank you, Tina. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. And I would like to show you some map. So I am from Sakha Republic, which is the biggest region of the Russian Federation with a territory more than 3 million square kilometers. You know, it's a huge area, 3 time zones, 5 times of France, very extreme climate conditions, and lack of infrastructure. And the population is less than 1 million people in general in our region. But if we talk about Arctic zone of the Sakha Republic, it consists from 13 districts, and it's more than half of the total area of Sakha Republic, which means above of the Arctic Circle. And we have 119 communities, settlements in the Arctic districts of Sakha Republic. There are about 67,000 people living in the Arctic zone of Sakha Republic. And historically, these areas were inhabited and are inhabited by several indigenous peoples like Aven, Evenki, Yukagir, Dolgan, and Chukchi, and also Sakha people. And these indigenous peoples, they practice still today traditional livelihoods like reindeer herding, fishing, hunting. And of course, you can imagine how sparsely populated area it is. And as I said, one of the biggest challenges for our region is very huge distances, lack of infrastructure, and very extreme climate conditions. So if we talk about connectivity, then I would say that in our republic, about 80%, more than 80% of population has broadband connectivity. But if we talk about Arctic district, you see from the map that it mostly satellite coverage and satellite access to internet. And you see only in the left side of the map, you see this red line, and this is the first fiber optic cable which is constructed to the one of the Arctic districts of Sakha Republic. Other 11 Arctic districts are covered by satellite internet, and of course it's very slow and very expensive for population. So it's very hard to speak about affordability of internet connection, even though all of our schools and municipality administration and healthcare centers are connected to internet, and it's subsidized by the state. So those centers are connected. But if we talk about why it's important to have affordable access to internet and to be connected, of course, we talk about general security, because in this kind of harsh climate conditions and huge areas without any infrastructure, it's very important to stay connected, because we have many cases with people lost and freeze to death, etc. So it's very important to be connected all the time, and we can provide only satellite connection there. Also, in education, especially today when we have this COVID pandemic, it's very important to provide all the schools with connectivity. And also we have special kind of schools, because many people in our population, they lead the nomadic way of life. So we have very special types of nomadic schools. So all the schools also need mobile connection, and it's satellite connection, which is, again, is very expensive. Also, telemedicine is important, and as I said, even more important during COVID pandemic. But in general, also, I would say that for business development, it's also very important for reindeer husbandry, for other traditional activities, as well as for industrial companies. And you will be, well, also, I would like to underline that today, young people, they first question when they looking for a job, for example, in Arctic district, they ask about the speed of internet in the village. So now it's very difficult to engage young people to stay and work in our communities. So as I said, business development is important, and you will be surprised that actually in the far east of the Russian Federation, 80% of IT services come from Sakha Republic. And it's very interesting phenomenon of Sakha Republic. We have many young people who are working in IT sector, and I think this is also very important. You see that from the map, these yellow lines are projected fiber optic cables. So we are working to develop this the net of fiber optic to increase the speed.
Well, Mikhail, you raised some critical additional points here that I would like to invite our other panelists to come back to the screen to address. I mean, I think from you, from Maya, from Nick, we're hearing, the very real benefits, but also the very real ongoing needs in terms of broadband services throughout the Arctic. And so I guess the leadoff question I'd like to invite our panelists back to address is, we're making progress, but there are still gaps. There are gaps in availability, gaps in affordability, and as I think Laura put it, communities that don't have any, and then communities that do, how do we get people access to it? What comes next? What do you see as what happens next to bridge those remaining gaps? We're making progress, but where do the next advancements come from? Does anybody want to jump up for that one, or should I call out names?
If I may, if I allowed to start, so I think this, I would say this is a chicken and egg question. So we've done some say researches, more it was kind of a economical modeling for our Arctic project cable, and basically in the model, if you take the model, if provided you have good connectivity in the area, you start selling more services, and actually they will justify the OPEX to cover the cost to deliver that service. But the question is how to come to this model. So first you need to invest a lot to get the infrastructure, and then actually you can, let's say, benefit from it. So the low consumption, actually the high prices cause low consumption, and low consumption causes low spendings. So I'm really impressed by Maya and her ARPU, which is impressive, but I don't think people in Yakutia could afford such money to be spent on connectivity. But to me, it's more kind of similar to a chicken and egg question. So someone needs to invest first, and then to get from current condition to the FMO, future mode of operations.
So Kotzebue in this region actually has fiber optic cable that's run. When I was the mayor, I signed the Tidewater permit and allowed the construction of the tube that went, from our town underneath the water and out into the Kotzebue Sound, right into the channel, which people were upset about. But hey, it was really important at that time. I was the mayor in 2015, so it's been 5 years, and we still don't necessarily have that fiber optic speed. We have the cables, we have the, it's run, it's, I think Quintillion was who I gave the permit to. And so if like the next steps for our region would be to figure out what's going on with the fiber and maybe not put a put a governor on it. And so, you know, we're continually upset that we pay for services when we do have that opportunity, but it's just not live yet. And we keep hearing yet. And, you know, our 3 internet providers, I'm not sure what's going on, and I don't really mind. I'm just worried about, you know, trying to make sure that our staff can do a good job in providing, you know, public service for 9 million acres of federal public land. And you heard Nick talk about subsistence and how important it is. And, you know, part of our position and sitting at work, teleworking through the internet is to protect those subsistence resources and ensure that, you know, the perpetuation of the culture takes place up here. And it's really hard to do with slow internet or inaccessible internet or expensive internet. So.
Well, this really sad story that Quintillion cable is still not lit. We will try to get lessons learned from that project in our Arctic cable project. So, but I think the important thing is also that you actually this is you need to find synergies. A single business. So whether it's like a B2C, B2B, or B2G, just if you focus on one type of customers, you will not justify investments. You need to approach a broad number of customers. That's one thing. I do understand that in some areas, for example, north of Alaska, probably there's not much international traffic or not much international enterprises who would pay for that big investment. But probably we should also look for new technologies like this Starlink. What's the name of that Elon Musk initiative? So probably new technologies will come. So I graduated from physics department, and I can tell you guys, we still haven't reached the limit of the physical, you know, boundaries and physical limitation to carry traffic. So we still have lots of potential opportunities, but now they're more in scientific stage, in research stage. So there is no quick answer, there is no quick solutions, and I think such conferences are very important because to me, I was really impressed by listening to people who really need that services. To me, living in the capital and having, you know, 100 meg connection on my mobile is really hard to understand people living above the Arctic Circle and having issues with connectivity. So now I will be double enthusiastic to build our project.
Yeah, and I'll follow up a little bit too on that if I'm not derailing where you want to go, Tina. But the you know, Maya raises a lot of important points, and you know, the affordability of service is definitely still a challenge in rural Alaska. You know, you've mentioned a couple of times that there's, you know, 9 million acres in your area, but then across the whole northern portion of Alaska, which covers an enormous territory, there's, you know, something like 10,000 people. You know, and I live just outside of Washington, D.C. In my county alone, there's over 1 million people here for the providers in this area to, you know, spread the cost of deploying networks in this area across that 1 million people. And it just, you know, it's not really comparable so the way, you know, the business models in the different markets. I agree with you, like $450 is an awful lot of money to spend every month. And you know, that is not easy on a family's budget. So I'm not minimizing that in any degree, but I'm just saying that the challenge here is sort of on every side. And it's by working together, like how can we find a way to, you know, sort of piece together the whole puzzle and find revenue from, you know, the business community and find, you know, government support programs that work and find communities working together to aggregate demand in schools and rural health clinics. And, you know, there is no silver bullet, but it's just like, you know, how can we all work together to find a way to make this work for everybody? And that's definitely our goal. And it's, you know, I think we all want to pull in the same direction on all that. So.
Well, my question is, how replicable are the models that have been put in place today that, frankly, Tim, do combine all of those different components to create a business plan? Or are we looking to the next evolution of technology to be able to do that? Is it an either or?
I'll let
I think
others.
it's a combination. I think it's a combination. I think that's one of the things that we're looking at in the report, and we're hoping in our report for the connectivity working group, and putting it together with place-based examples. And then our goal would be that because our working group is really a North American Arctic approach, we want to be able to have Mark Murray take that to the Arctic Council and ensure that we're being representative on a pan-Arctic basis, to see, are the kinds of ideas and the decision matrix that we're putting together around these private investment, public-private investments, or public investment only, are those place-based examples that we are looking at? Do they work across all of the Arctic regions? So but I think it's both, Gina.
I'm also struck by this idea, the chicken and the egg phrase keeps coming back to me too. And Mikhail and Nick, I mean, I think about the experiences that you described, right? People want to be in their villages, but then they ask, where's the internet? And we're also saying, well, it's hard to bring internet if there's not enough people, right? So there's this other chicken and the egg. Do you have any thoughts about how that's been tackled in your communities?
If I could jump in here, Tina, I think we need to stop looking, if we purely base it on people in the Arctic, it's going to be really hard to build connectivity out because the number of people or the geographical space is huge. But that's not the only opportunity in the Arctic. I mean, it should be our primary goal is to serve Northern and Arctic peoples, but you can't build a business case on population numbers. But there are other economic opportunities which may help justify expansion of connectivity through the Arctic, whether, as we see, it's connecting a faster linkage between Europe and Asia in the case of the Arctic cable. Maybe it's the case of resource development and mining today. Smart mining needs connectivity. There's other business cases that you could use to help build the case to expand connectivity to serve local peoples. And as Curtis said, one of the primary drivers of high cost is actually energy. And so we need to, at the same time, work not only to improve connectivity, but and to address the affordability issue is actually by lowering energy costs and getting communities off diesel, which is the most highest expensive in the Canadian North energy source. So it's a multiple approach. And what interested me most was Maya's comments about how they have the fiber link and it hasn't been turned on. That's such a issue of poor planning or whatever. But we have other instances where we put public funding into building backbones and they're running past communities and we haven't done that linkage. So there's a backbone relatively in northern place distances, relatively close, but we're still not connecting all the communities that could be possibly connected. Yeah. And so it's a comprehensive, we're not going to solve this issue with just connectivity. We're going to have to solve it with actually energy partnerships with one of the things with what's interesting about the KIA project is that they're looking at a hydro fiber link. Because if you're running an infrastructure corridor for hydro, can we not link and save costs by linking fiber along the same corridor?
Yeah.
So
well, I have to say, I have to thank you, Laura, for bringing it back to the big picture and adding that perspective, as well as identifying how this issue of broadband connectivity ultimately ties back to many of the other issues that are being addressed in the Arctic Resilience Forum. So regrettably, would love to have more time with all of you. I appreciate everything that you bring to the table in this discussion. Jennifer, I will turn it back to you.
Thanks so much. I hate to end the conversation. I think it's been absolutely fabulous. I sort of repeat the words reliable, accessible connectivity. That's what we've heard. We've heard about the innovations connected to that and the focus on communities. And that this really is about recognizing the connection between this and other really important things related to resilience, and in particular, other forms of infrastructure that are really, really important to these communities. I just want to thank everyone for their time. I also want to remind you that next week we have the gender equality session, and we're going to have an amazing group there as well, a lineup of speakers who are going to talk about the interplay between resilience, gender, and empowerment. And so we really hope you'll join us again for that session. And thank you again for joining us. I think this has really been a valuable conversation. And